Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here in the Greece Diner for the Knowledge Exchange. It's the last one of this season, but we will be back later this year, likely in November. Today we are going to discuss the backyard biome, and I'm pleased with the panelists. We're all here. And so to begin, I would like to acknowledge that the University of Manitoba campuses are located on the original lands of the Anishinaabeg, Inanuak, Ansiinanuak, Dakota Oyate, and Dene, and on the national homeland of the Red River Métis. The University of Manitoba has thousands Indigenous students, professors, staff, as well as alumni. And I would like to particularly thank the elders in residence for their spiritual and cultural guidance that they are providing to the community. So today, the discussion is on exploring land management for our gardens and beyond, from the perspectives of traditional indigenous land-based knowledge and keeping in mind Earth's health and well-being and our local food security. I'm very much looking forward to the discussion. I am myself a soil scientist, and when I hear the word land, I get very excited. So the U of M Knowledge Exchange is an important opportunity for researchers to share their knowledge with the general public and the UM community at large. And it's hosted by the Office of the Vice President of Research and International and the Learning for Life Network. And we are very grateful for the support that many people are providing to host these events. Our moderator today is Dr. Stephane McLachlan, who is a professor of environment and geography in the Clayton Riddell Faculty of Environment, Earth and Resources. Dr. McLachlan coordinates the Environmental Conservation Laboratory, and his research focuses on environmental health and justice in partnership with Indigenous communities in Manitoba, Canada, and around the world. So with that, it's now my pleasure to turning it to Stephane McLachlan, Ekosane, and merci, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Anamika. So yeah, it's great here. This is one of the first knowledge exchange events that I've done or been part of in any kind of capacity, and so it's all a bit new for me. But as we were talking about it, and we kind of inherited the term backyard biome, and we were kind of thinking, well, what is that? And hopefully that's something that you that you will feel comfortable exploring with each or all of the panelists. We have the people here who are in person, and then we've got people who are participating online. And so the way that we will set it up is after my opening remarks, each of the panelists in the order that they're sitting will spend 5 or 10 minutes individually talking about what it is that they're up to and kind of what's top of mind for them. And what you'll see is that there's a huge diversity of perspectives here and a huge diversity in the way that people might define backyard. And so it's going to be a very expansive approach to the term backyard and biome. It's not going to be just a Western get rid of the humans and you have your biome intact approach. And so here what I think you'll see is that everyone here has a very people-centered approach to the way they interact with their environments and the land. And so after those presentations, what we'll do is we'll kind of put it out to the audience. I have a few questions. As I was cycling out here on my e-bike, I was coming up with questions, and so I've got a backlog of those. And so we'll make an audience-first approach. Again, weaving in both the in-person questions and comments as well as those online. And we'll wrap up just before 8:30 is our plan. Kind of the washrooms are out here on the right at the end, you've kind of got the coffee and tea and cookies. And so, yeah, this will be kind of a really interesting event, I think. One of the things that was important to me, even though I'm trained as a biologist, is all the work that we do is very community first in approach. And so it was important for me to take that larger, more expansive approach to the university community. And so what we have, in fact, the majority of the speakers now, because Megan Young had a family kind of emergency and wasn't able to make it. So the 3 remaining panelists all engaged with community. In fact, 2 of them, you know, their primary employment is outside of the university. And so I think it's a very inclusive approach to the work that we all do and find as important. So, so maybe what I'll do then, I'll kind of introduce them in order. And so first of all is Damien Laurenchuk, who I've known for a number of years. You're the former ED of Food Matters Manitoba. And we've worked on a number of projects, and he's come and he's visited with me in my class, environmental class. You're originally from Fox Lake Cree Nation in Ithanu, and I know kind of food is tremendously important to you, and culture and language and working with youth. And so that's great. Next is Raymond Ngarbui, who's originally from Chad, and who's an educator and a kind of gardener extraordinaire. So that might be the person that you save all your gardening questions to, even though if you're interested in hunting moose, then maybe Damien or even Brian will be the people to go to for that. And so you're kind of one of your big projects that you coordinate is the Rainbow Community Gardens out here at the university, just past Smart Park, and where you kind of caretake with community kind of the food security of over 300 families. And so that's great. Thank you, Raymond, for joining us. And finally, but not least, is Brian Rice, who's Haudenosaunee and is an Indigenous scholar here at the University of Manitoba, and does lots of culture and land and local history, working with the environment. And so thank you for that. So we have a wide diversity of panelists, and yeah, without further ado, Damien, we'll go in this order, and then we'll open it up for questions and comments after.
All right. First, it's an honor to be here. Thanks for pulling me in at the very nick of time here. And if I'm not making too much sense, you'll have to excuse me. I was stranded in the bush for a few days. I just got home this morning, so I'm not. I'm at very low capacity, but I'll try my best to be coherent here. And if anybody's interested, there's some wicked pictures I could share of the little journey to get out of here. But I think it's really appropriate coming here to talk about backyard biomes, being out in what we would call in an Inuak farm, an indigenous farm, you know, our own little harvesting area. The particular place where I was at, we call it Miskwai Sagaigan. It's a little bit north of Norway House Cree Nation. And what that name means, it refers to as you're paddling through, your paddle will touch the vegetation, that false floor of vegetation in the grass. So it means something like it's not that deep. But, which, now that I say that, it's something I hear my daughter say all the time. It sounds pretty cool here. But, you know, that area, I've learned so much from that area from going around there, just like all the other areas that I've lived at, that I've harvested at, and that I've spent time with the elders out on the land. That's where I got my education from. And, you know, I think it's given me such an amazing life, because really when we think about it, the earth, Gawinanaski, as we would call it, our Mother Earth, is the ultimate teacher. It's developed the ultimate models, models that have come to be sustainable for, what is it, like 1.5 billion years, or I could be way off, but that's what I'm That's what how old I tell people the Earth is whenever the question comes up. But it's these systems, it's like this super complex, unbelievably complex web of systems that are all coming together, all with their own initiatives and their own prerogatives, but it somehow all balances itself out. So that's what I've learned, especially in this context, you know, about gardening and stuff like that. It's about learning the lessons. It's about being observant. It's about watching and going out there and learning the land, not trying to like outsmart the land using you know, things like pesticides and all that kind of stuff, which only create more problems down the road. But learning, how does the land work? How do these things come together? How do they balance themselves out? You know, one of the things that, actually I forgot to set my timer. I'm gonna go on for an hour here, so.
I'm your timer.
You're my timer?
Yeah.
All right, start it over.
He means it.
So how long was that so far?
8 minutes left.
Left? Okay. I'm going to talk really slow. But so one of the things that I, you know, I just learned out on this trip where we were hunting ducks and geese and stuff like that. You know, I was talking to the elder that I was with about, it was a lot of time like reflecting and reminiscing, and I was talking about the original elders that took me out, you know, and taught me all this kind of stuff out on the land. And I started talking about like these mythical creatures, like these like scary beings in our history. And you know, there's creatures that are like covered in frost, and they smell like rotting flesh. And when you encounter them in the bush, like you can't speak, you can't do anything, you just faint. There's other ones where there's like a weeping woman that's like, you know, crouched over, crying, waiting for you to come before, you know, she stands up, and it's just like this crazy looking monster that devours, you know, like all sorts of wild stories like that. And one of the things the elder told me, he said, you know, when he was little, the elders used to tell him, all these beings that have come here onto the earth, even like the ones we see as these bad beings, all of them have a purpose. Creator gave them all a job to do. And in your context, you could look at those as like the pests and the weeds and all that kind of stuff. You know, everything has a purpose here. If it didn't have a purpose, it wouldn't have lasted the test of time, right? So how do we work with those things? How do we understand what their job is? What is it that they bring to us? How do we work with these systems instead of trying to paddle upstream, instead of fighting and spending all of our effort just to get nowhere? You know, comically, the first, I was going to say when I started growing, which was like growing plants, which was up north, but I learned how to first keep plants alive and grow plants and all that kind of stuff as a teenager growing weed in the city here. But that's another story. I later learned how to use my powers for good as I was you know, managing a lot of food programs and creating food programs in my community. But where I've had the most success gardening is it's in the Hudson Bay lowlands. It's in the subarctic. It's in the muskeg. It's somewhere where I've been told like a million times, you're not going to grow these plants. You know, I've had a farmer come to help us to the community. I was growing corn there, and he's like, you're wasting your time. And like, I probably was, but to me that was more of a challenge, right? So I was really dead set on how am I going to find out everything that I can to make this work. And when we started our garden project up there, we had no funding. We had no money. I had no money. I was completely broke back then. We didn't have equipment. We didn't even have soil. How are you going to garden without soil, right? Like it's literally just swamp and muskeg and a lot of coniferous trees where, you know, everything they drop is just acidic. But one of the things I learned from the old timers out there, they told me to go and walk out into the bush and find areas where deciduous trees grew, where there was poplar stands. And it was few and far between, but I would go out and we found a wheelbarrow, and it was a pop tire. We didn't even have a functioning wheelbarrow, but we would take it and we would drag it out into the bush on our hikes looking for these areas of deciduous trees, birch and poplar. And when we found them, we would sweep all of that fallen, decaying organic matter, the leaves and stuff like that on the ground. We would sweep that aside, and underneath it was this black gold. Underneath it was this amazing soil that you would never expect to find in the subarctic, so far, you know, in the muskeg and the swamps of the Hudson Bay lowlands. So trip after trip, we would haul out that organic matter. And then we began to go and look for all the different things that we could piece together and create our own soil. You know, I think in hindsight, the funniest thing was like hiking out in the bush, hauling out plastic bags of like literal shit. I would go find moose trails, and I would collect all the moose droppings, and I would collect the ptarmigan droppings and caribou droppings and all that kind of stuff, and hike it back, and we would mix it all in. Fish guts, you know, whatever we had at our disposal, and we created our own gardens like that. So really, the big thing that I learned from this is, you know, it's about understanding what you have to work with and understanding how they work together, and understanding that balance. You know, I think one of the most amazing lessons that I think that I've learned from the bush. Well, I'll tell two quick stories about that. One of them is you know, how we're always like pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing for productivity, but you know, you have to see the other side of that. You always have to see that balance. You know, the same way that we've got these good beings and we've got these bad beings. They all balance each other out, and without those forces pushing on each other, everything collapses. Everything falls apart. You know, you look at a braid of sweetgrass, for example. We call that Wigasko-Mescanal, the sweetgrass road. On one side, you have Meno-Mescanal. You have a good road where if you run your thumb down that braid, all the little bumps on that braid will keep your thumb in the middle of that braid. On the other side, when you run your thumb down that braid, anywhere you go, those grooves will lead you off of that road. It will lead you away from your goals, away from what you're trying to accomplish. But you can't have one without the other, right? You can't just start taking things away and expect it to still exist. So, you know, in that sense, we look at the moon. We look at one of the most beautiful things in creation. We call that Gokum now, Tipiskai Pisam, our grandmother moon. Only once a month, you know, you see her shine in her full splendor. Sometimes you barely even just see a little sliver of her. So, you know, with the natural plant world, with the medicines and all that kind of stuff. All right. With the natural plant world and you know, the medicines and the job that they have to play, we attribute the water on this earth to the thunderbird. You know, it brings the rain down to us, down to the earth. And as we go through the summer, you know, and we finish with the thunderstorms, and with that rain, we watch the plants start to change colors. You know, that vibrant green and those beautiful colors in the flowers, they all start to just die away. And it goes from green to yellow to orange and red and brown. And it's like the plants, they're getting undressed, they're dropping their robes, and they're getting ready to go to sleep for that long slumber. And you know, up far in the north, in Swampy Creek country, the winter is the longest season. It's very, very harsh. It's very cold. The days are very short. But that thunderbird, instead of dropping rain, now we recognize it as that thunderbird is dropping these snowflakes, what we refer to as the thunderbird's eggs. Snow we call gona, and where that comes from is Penesiu Wagona, which means the thunderbird's eggs. And they drop so thick that they put the entire natural world to sleep. All the medicines, all the plants, they lock the waters. They put them all to rest. And it's like I said, it's the longest season. The longest season is rest. But what happens after that is all of a sudden the days start to get longer. All of a sudden it gets hotter. All that blanket starts to disappear and those eggs start to hatch. And it's only after that extreme period of rest, of reflection, of learning and storytelling and all that kind of stuff. It's only after that time that we watch the entire world in the Northern Hemisphere explode in the greatest celebration of life that the Earth has ever produced, which is the springtime. The waterways, they just explode open with life. There's these plant, waterfowl migrations, the plant medicine, they start to spring to life again, bloom their flowers, the fish start to spawn, and we learn about how we can get the best out of ourselves and best out of what we're trying to do in life. So that's all I'll share for now. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, Damien. So yeah, very expansive. And I'm sure you have questions and follow-ups for Damien. And next, Raymond.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. And thank you to all the team here for inviting me. It's an honor. Listening to my good buddy here, Damien, I was feeling like living what he was describing, and especially when he mentioned mood and stuff. It reminded me my trip to up north in the PA and in Thompson for the land-based education with the students, where I got honored with there is a special dish there that is not given to everybody. You have to be a kind of special in order to be treated with that dishes. So can anybody guess what it could be? It's a moose nose. I knew it. Yeah. Yes. So I got that treatment, and I'm very grateful for that. Yes, I can say that I'm kind of passionate gardener. I'm somebody who has some passion for gardening. So talking about backyard biome means a lot to me. I come from a country, a former French colony called Chad, C-H-A-D, which is a country in Central Africa. It's the 5th largest country in Africa. And it's one of the countries that struggles a lot in the world because of the underground resources and all this. So food insecurity is very high. Level of food insecurity in Chad is very high, same as some of the war-torn countries in Africa or in some parts of the world. Food insecurity situation in Chad went back from the year 1920s, because it's linked to the world wars. So what happened is that when the World War I started, the soldiers who were fighting needed to be dressed, needed to be kept warm, and to eat too. So as a colony, France at that time came to Chad to get to impose some culture, some crops, including rice, cotton, rice and cotton. So those two crops were the imposed ones. And in some parts of Africa, there was coffee, cocoa, and all those things. Why they imposed there, it's to get enough of those resources to support the soldiers in the battlefield. So in Chad, when they introduced rice and cotton, it was very difficult because every single family had to grow those crops. And those crops became the priority. So many people got their hands cut, their legs cut, and their ears, all this because of the fact that they did not take good care of their plots. When they came, you have to have your farm has to be cleaned without weed and all this. So what happened is that, and also about a huge part of the land should be used for those crops, and very less is left for crops that folks can eat. So because of that, people in Chad started growing food around their homes. They start growing food around their homes, and they found that instead of the food that they started growing in their backyards were producing a lot. So that's how the interest for the backyard garden started. And so how they were doing it, and they continue doing it up to now, is to have they usually go for the crops that are early, they can do early to eat during the time that the lean time. It means the time between the crops are growing, the plants are growing, and the time that they will be ready for harvest. So during that time, it's called, I don't know if there are some French speaking here, but it's called la période de vache maigre. Période de vache maigre, it means it's the time that goats became small. The goats lose weight. That's what it means. So during that time, it means the crops that, the harvest that the families harvested from September to end of October and stuff, they finish eating it in June. And then July is from June. In Chad, the raining season, there are two seasons. There's a raining season and the dry season. And the raining season starts from end of May until end of September. And from October and that, it's about 950 millimeters of rain. That's before. But now, with the climate change effects, that drops sometimes to 400 to 500. And there are some years that the rain comes a lot, like 150 millimeters a day, for example, and then everywhere it's flooded. So during the time between June and end of July, that's the time that people need something to eat. So what they do is they put down the seeds early in May, and then from beginning of July, end of June, they start harvesting the leaves, and then slowly to the corns and stuff. And the focus there was and is still on three crops: the corn, the squash, and the beans. And it's amazing that when I came here, I found that in the indigenous culture here, they do practice the same thing. They do call it three sisters planting, indigenous way of growing stuff. So back home, why they put those three crops together? It's to give those three crops together. They make a good symbiotic, because the corn grows tall, and the bean climbs over the corn, so the corn stalk helps the bean to support the bean to go up, and then the bean sorts the squash. Over there, we usually use pumpkins. So the pumpkins leaves, the pumpkins grows on the ground, so the leaves covers the ground to prevent, and then it presses the weeds, prevent them from growing up. So what the squash or pumpkins leaves do is also to protect the ground around the plants, around the corn and the beans roots from hard sun, so to keep the moisture down. So if the ground is keeps the moisture, and the bean from the other side, the roots produce nitrogen to feed the two other plants, for example. So they and also here they call it three sisters, but back home we call it four neighbors. Four neighbors because the fourth sister, as we can say, is hens, like the chickens. Why? Because the chickens, the hens, it's during that time that it's the best time for them to lay eggs. And they like best time for them. Why? Because during the dry season and stuff, when they lay eggs, they are likely to lose them. Either the two-legged animals do eat them, or they can lose them somewhere else. People can eat them and all this. So during that time, when they do, what they do, they go under the pumpkin's leaves there. So they hide there, they make space, and then they lay their eggs there. And the pumpkins, they have some, I can't know how to describe it in English, but some pests and animals don't like it because sometimes it can make them itchy. So they don't go there very often. And that's how the chickens, the hens can hide there and finish taking care of their eggs, and then to hatch. And once they hatches, then they bring out their babies, the chicks. And I do recall that when we were small there, when we come back from school, we used to go and look for when the parents are outside, nothing to eat. Then we go and we hunt those eggs under the pumpkins, and then we get them and we cook them and eat them. So when I came here, I found that it's about the same thing, and the production from those backyard gardens is very high, because what they do is the waste from the kitchen. Anytime when the waste from the kitchen, they come, mother, sisters, they come and they drop it on the backyard, around the backyard. And when they drop them there, the animals come to help themselves to eat. And by eating there, they leave whatever down. And so those places are very fertile. And being fertile, they don't need to use any fertilizer or chemical like my friend said. So when I arrived here in Canada, from Chad I had to be in Cameroon for 6 years before I arrived here in Canada. And arriving here, I was having some difficulties adjusting myself to local food. And that's how I went to Knox Church, and I said, okay, since I knew a little bit about agriculture or horticulture, why not start something that can help? Because my settlement counselor took me to a grocery store to get ethnic foods. So I went there, I got some leaves and some other stuff that I used to eat back home. But when I bought them, it was very expensive and a small quantity. And when I cooked them, the taste was not the same. And it's frozen and I didn't have the same taste. So I went to the Knox Church and I asked the Reverend there, Pastor Bill Miller, I asked if they can help me finding a place where to start a small garden for myself, and maybe some other families that are here may have some same needs. So he said, oh, we have many people in our congregation here who have been asking about the same thing, so how about we go to the city? So they took me to the city to ask for the land, and the city said they had small plots, and their rent, we had to rent them for $60, and that's every growing season. And I said, no, that's not what I wanted. So the city referred us to the University of Manitoba. And Pastor Bill Miller, they took me to the university here, so that how we talked to the university, and with plant sciences, physical plant, they went there to give us a small plot by the garden here. And during that time, the U of M students had their garden there too, so we started together with a small half acre with 16 families, and we started getting some support from Food Matters Manitoba, where my friend used to be the executive director, and also from the University of Manitoba with everything that we needed. And then from the 16 families in 2008, the project started growing, and then the university started providing us with more land, and the OMSU decided to leave the whole thing for us, and so the garden grew to over 260 families growing on the university land, and expanded across the city and in the rural areas for about 400 newcomer families growing their own vegetables. So it's that's what I could say for now, and I will pass it to
Great.
Back to
Okay,
Stephane.
wonderful. Thank you, Raymond. So again, not what you think very much if you have this idea of backyard biome, and that's the reason that we're here. So next, Brian Rice. Thank you.
Sego, Skanagoga, Brian Ujits, Sewakwego. Hello, everybody. So I guess just to start, I'm going to Washington, and it's part of my story. My dad's World War II military battalion is getting a Congressional Gold Medal there. And all my uncles served. They're all from Ganawage, Mohawk Reservation. They became iron workers. They were hardened men. And when my dad left, because of his PTSD from the war, he was a prisoner of war for a year. And then he rejoined and got a silver medal. He had a couple of bronze medals. When he left, it kind of left a big void in my life. All of us kids, you know, it kind of changed, eh? I always felt really insecure, you know. I felt, you know, how could I be so weak, you know, and my dad be so strong, but actually, you know, he was suffering a lot. I didn't know that. I was just a kid. So I got into a lot of activities that weren't very good. You know, it was the early 70s, late 60s. I'm almost 70 now, so I mean, it's a long time ago. And that lasted till about 1981. I tried university school because I had the opportunities through my reservation or my reserve, and never worked out. I think I got 2 years of college. I got I think it was credits in judo and archery, and that was it. I think I was there for 2 years once, and Museum des Beaux-Arts and all kinds of different trials and errors. But when I changed my life in 1981, I went back to school and I managed to get a BA, became a marathon runner, and got a master's, and worked in a small little Anishinaabe community in the north. I was a school teacher there, their first Native Studies school teacher in social studies there. And I was a principal for 1 year. And then I became a university professor. So, I'm just trying to show you where the scale kind of went from the bottom, to the slow rise, that happens in life when we start living a better life, eh? I'm actually going to be talking at the treatment center over in Gimli tomorrow. I've been invited there, so I'm going to talk about those kind of things, I wanted to bring all my stuff, but I left it at home. I thought it was in my office. Doesn't matter. Anyway, I went back to school, got my master's degree, and then I got into McGill University, and it didn't work out because I was in a doctoral program there, and there were no Indigenous courses. It was anthropology or archaeology, but there were no Indigenous teachers or anything else. So I joined the Traditional Knowledge Program in California. I had the opportunity to travel the world. I went to places like Thailand to be with the Karen people, Mexico a couple of times, Mayans, descendants of Nahuatl people, the Aztecs, and I traveled all over the place. And I actually defended my dissertation at a conference of voodoo healers and Western medical doctors in Senegal, Africa. That's where we had our cohort at that time. And it was all very interesting, for me. It was like a whole new life. I was lucky to have a Native Studies job for 6 years where I taught the first course, I think, on residential schools in 1992. And 1993, a course called The Fourth World, which was about Indigenous people globally. And that wasn't really standard in those days. Everybody's doing it now, so it was, back in those days, in the 90s. And I got my PhD, and like I said, I was in Native Studies, so I had 6 years there, and then I couldn't get that tenured position. There was reasons for that. I taught a course called Christianity, Colonialism, and I forget the rest of the name of that, but you can imagine it was a Jesuit university. They didn't like it, So, the father who was the president, brought me up and says, well, we're only going to give you 2-year contracts now, So I ended up in religious studies, though, at University of Winnipeg for 3 years. Ironically, just so you know, at University of Winnipeg, Spence Street, that used to be Spence Creek. Colony Road was Colony Creek. So they came up from the Assiniboine River. And that's where the Métis and the Cree and the Assiniboine, the Nakota people, used to basically prepare for the bison hunts. So that was all prairie out there. And so they would go out, they would go over towards Charleswood. And at Charleswood, you have the passage, which is where the main bison crossing is. So you can imagine a lot of people were going down there to hunt and everything else. And then they would come back, and then the women would, tan all the hides and everything else. And these are areas, that most of us don't know anything about, because we're not taught about the history of Winnipeg. When I went and taught in the north, I wasn't Anishinaabe, but I made a point that I had to understand their perspectives in order to teach the kids. And I've always taken that with me wherever I've gone to be a teacher, I guess, at university, whatever. Spent 3 years in religious studies at University of Winnipeg, doing Aboriginal spirituality courses. Then here, 2 years, running an Aboriginal governance program up at Saging First Nation. 15 more years in education, doing Aboriginal focused courses in education with Dr. Mary Young and Dr. Frida Hart, who both have passed away now. I went to school in California with Dr. Frida Hart. We graduated, she graduated a little after me. And so I've been, very, very fortunate, but why am I here? I'm here because when I did my dissertation, I walked 700 miles through my own people's territory, following what we call the path of the peacemaker, who confederated the 5 nations, Haudenosaunee nations, making up some called the Iroquois Confederacy. And I went to all those places I had learned about in the stories from the elders, most in particular Jake Thomas, who used to recite the Great Law for 9 days. And I wanted to touch the land. I wanted to be in those places. So when I saw this invitation, if you say in Ken and Rec, land-based education, I don't have the experiences, I did some hunting and I did those types of things, but I don't have those experiences so much. I have experiences of being on the land in a different way. Every time I would go out on my walk, I'd put some tobacco down, I'd pray to be safe, and I'd bring all my stuff and maybe get 20, 25 miles or so and come to a significant site. So when this opened up, I said, well, I think I know something about it, because that's part of my dissertation. And so this is what I do here at the University of Manitoba. I bring my students out on long walks. Sometimes, I think the longest one we did was about 13K, surprising for them, It's not always that long anymore. I've kind of, narrowed it a little bit down and everything else, trying to cut it up. But we have beautiful land here. A lot of people don't know at University of Manitoba, you had, let's see, just across, you had the Frobishers, Lacoste, Normans, they were the Métis families in the area, the Nose, all kind of in this particular area. But people don't know this was a hunting club at one time, 1912 or so. The richest people of Winnipeg, who got a lot of their money from Métis land, used to come out here with foxes, and they would let the foxes go, and they'd let the dogs loose, just like in England, because they were trying to reframe Winnipeg from an indigenous town, if you want to say it, into a British city. I mean, when the Governor General, Queen Victoria's son, came here, they had the exhibition grounds up at McPhillips. They used to go in the north end. That used to be the north end. They actually had indigenous people on horseback with a fake Louis Riel and the soldiers chasing him down to show the victory of civilization over savagery. And so we have 4 burial grounds here that I know of that are indigenous. And I bring my students there and we pray, maybe put some tobacco down in those places. Raglan Road is one. Then we've got a burial mound here. And we've got many significant places. So I teach history. I teach indigenous culture because I take my students out and we do sunrise ceremony here on the lands, just in the agricultural lands. We get waken up by the coyotes and the deer and such, and I've got some beautiful pictures of the coyotes and the deers coming out in the mist and such. And sometimes I'll bring my students, if they can't make it, I'll bring them alone and we'll go out and we'll just have a sunrise ceremony. What I mean is, I don't mean just putting down tobacco, I mean waiting for the sun to come up. Because it's pointless having a sunrise ceremony if you're not going to watch the sun come up. And that often happens, people go and then, they forget about the sun. So I do these things, history, I do culture, I do the walks for physicality, and I do nature. So those are my 4 key areas that I concentrate in. I talk about these lands here. I talk about the lands within the city of Winnipeg, because I'm not going back out into the bush anymore. I'm almost 70 years old, but I believed that we can do things here in the city. We don't have to always go out 100 miles to a place, because they all know, the people from those places know their areas. They know those places. That's where they're from. Like my brother over here who's just talked about it, But here we have a place too. It's my home. It's been my home for about 25 years or so, and I try and learn more and more as I go along about the nature in this area here of Manitoba. We got such a beautiful area. The deer come out, the coyotes, the foxes. We got an eagle's nest over here. We got so much, It's kind of a special place in a way for me. because I was never able to do that. You know, all my time in academia, I was locked in a room. And for me, one of my struggles growing up is I hated being locked in a room. I left school when I was 15 years old and I went across Canada to Vancouver during the hippie times, you know, because I didn't want to be in a situation like this, and I've never gotten out now. I've been doing it, you know, forever, you know, and you know, I'm probably going to still do it. I always say, this is my thoughts on it. I always say, when my students start walking in front of me, that's the end of the road for me, you know. So I got my 10K in today, you know, it was all right. You know, I can't do fast running anymore. You know, when I was 60, I was doing 295 bench presses and all this kind of stuff. I can't do that stuff anymore. But I can do stuff, you know. And that's what I'm trying to get, you know, impart to my students, is I want them to know is you don't have to stop. You don't have to be a great athlete at 30 and then, you know, let it go, you know. Because it's those things that have kept me going to this time where I think I'm probably reasonably healthy, although we all suffer from sicknesses and such, and who knows what will happen that way. I've had 2 cancers in my family and such. But, you know, I bring the football team out here, you know, sometimes out there, and we'll just talk a little bit about bisons, because I used to track bears, bisons, wolves at Yellowstone National Park. I've got certificates in that. And also, they call it primitive skills. I call it traditional skills, you know, because these skills, I mean, you got to think, you know, it's really easy to hit a match, you know. Try and do a bow drill or try and do a hand drill, you know, and make a fire. That's how, N minus 30. And that's how our ancestors lived, you know, because they had to do it every day. Because if you don't succeed, you're going to freeze, you know. So I think about these things, and I think about the philosophies and such of my people. I know the stories. I know the creation story. It take me an hour to say it. I know the great law. I don't know it like Jake Thomas for 9 days, but I can do it for a few hours anyway, you know, give you a good general idea of what it is. I know my songs, all of those types of things. But I'm just a dude here, you know, so I'm just trying to enjoy this last quarter to the best I can. And maybe, I'll tell you this last thing. I was at a conference yesterday, education conference over at the Norwood Hotel, Indigenous Education. And everybody, there were 2 rooms, and everybody went to the other room except for 5 people. And that one person, she was at the University of Winnipeg, she said, 20-something years ago, and she was suffering from alcoholism, and she said, you failed me twice, but you said it's going to be okay. And she's a healer now. That's what keeps me going, you know? You get those disappointments, you know, in life and everything. But when a student says, who is going down and out, and you know what that's like, and they say you help them, that's the most beautiful thing in the world, I tell you. I'm crying because it is, you know? And beautiful thing is my son's never had a drink in his life. You know, my dad was an alcoholic because of his PTSD, all my uncles and everything else. Myself, I fell into that, you know. So, you know, we just got to inspire and keep going, you know. And that's about it. Thanks. You know.
So thank you for sharing, Brian, and everyone else. I think we'll transition in a few seconds or a few minutes, and we'll entertain kind of questions or comments from the audience. But it strikes me when I hear these 3 powerful speakers, and remember, I'm trained as a biologist, and I don't know if there are any biologists or Western scientists out there, but we're taught to remove ourselves from the stories that surround us, from the data. We're told to isolate ourselves and to impact on the things that we study in ways that are quantified and theoretical and entirely removed from the kind of moving stories that we've heard today. And in a sense, it just strikes me that all three, very diverse cultures, very different parts of Canada, and indeed the world, a lot of emergent things here. There's relationship, there's culture, there's spirituality, there's a sense of place, right? A sense of responsibility for the environment and for one another, and I'm sure you can remark on that as well. But it's just remarkable that kind of, again, backyard biome, what the heck is that? And then you see this come out and emerge from that kind of title. So thank you for sharing. And now, I know we have some folks that are participating online, and again, if I was a real facilitator, I would have worked this out ahead of time. But I assume is David that you will kind of indicate when there's and read out the question. Is there a question or a comment from the in-person? And then we've got a few mics, I think. Is there someone? Oh. So Anamika, she's my Uber boss, and so I get to order her around this evening. So that's delightful. But yeah, does someone have a question or a comment? And maybe just point out kind of if it's directed at someone or if it's directed at everybody, and then we can wing it from there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Actually, I would want to give comments. Like, I would like to thanks to everyone, especially the organizer, for such lovely program. When the speakers was sharing their story, it was like bringing tears to my eyes. I was at first a biologist. I completed my degree in biology. Then now I am a natural researcher. I'm doing my second master's here. And I was also a teacher. So somehow like I was getting similarities of all the scenarios, like hunting eggs of the chickpeas, which like now my kids won't be able to imagine. Maybe like they are more roaming around within the laptops, virtual worlds or something like that. But yes, I still dream of a different world with, all the indigenous knowledges, maybe which are based on science, but more traditional, more based on beliefs, love for nature. So I really would like to thank everyone, and it's really a good initiative, and I just look forward for a better world with the future generation. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you very much.
I guess I shouldn't clap when I'm holding the mic. Sorry for that.
So you were saying that you grow the food security kind of thing on the campus here. Where do you get your compost from? Like, is it made on campus, or is it like a shipped in kind of from around the city?
Good question. Yes, we do have composting site there at the garden, but the land is huge. It's a huge land, so what we compost there cannot cover the whole thing. So that's why from time to time we had to get compost from outside to add to it. And we are very environmental mind, some kind. So when I heard about the respect for land from my co-presenters here, it reminds me straight of how we do back home as well. And back home, before the Christianism was introduced to Africa or to my country or some other religions, my grandparents used to worship trees, sun, rivers and stuff. So when we came here, when we started this garden, the Rainbow Community Gardens, we decided to bring that culture here as well, to pay respect to the land. So that's why before we start planting or seeding every growing season, we get CEDA to, the Community Education Development Association, CEDA to arrange an elder from the indigenous community for us to come to say prayer to bless the land before we start planting. And also in the end of the growing season, we do the same ceremony, but this time it's to say thank you to the Creator for helping us with good crops and stuff. So that's what we do. So.
And then I've heard, maybe if you look under, don't know where I heard it, but if you look under some deciduous trees, apparently there's compost under there too. So it's anyway. So there we go. Anybody else?
This is really incredible, so interesting and inspiring. When I was reading the book Braiding Sweetgrass, I learned about the phenomenon of plants communicating with each other, which was firstly recognized by indigenous people. Can you tell us more about that? Trees, roots communicating with each other?
The short answer is no. Yeah, that's not something that I'm familiar with. I've heard that many times. I've read the studies, but yeah, I can't explain that or articulate any part of that.
But Damien, when you plant things up north, do you plant them in combinations, or do you treat each row and each plot as isolate from the others? Like, are there relationships in that way?
Yeah, I guess on that level, it's definitely, we have a very long history of gardening, if you want to call it that, up in my area, the Fox Lake area. But what I learned from the elders was it was learning ways of propagating plants that already naturally exist in the area. And then we would try and mimic conditions of where those plants were growing best. So, if you want to grow raspberries or if you want to grow blueberries, you're creating two completely different environments. You're not going to create an area where raspberries grow and plant blueberries because they're not going to last, and vice versa. So, like, in that sense, it's observing and seeing which of these plants, I guess, would communicate in a good way, which would support each other so that they could grow and they could thrive and they could produce that fruit that we enjoy. But scientific terms, I can make stuff up. I'd love to do that.
Great. Anybody else?
Yeah. Hi.
Okay.
I'm going to stand up because I can't see you back here. My name is Charlene, and I'm a curriculum consultant in the River East Transcona School Division. And we have all these new curriculums come out that are coming out, the framework documents, Mama Tawissawin, that talks about Murray Sinclair's Good Life, and doing those things with the kids. And a lot of that has to do with like helping reconnect students with the land. And one of the things that I find is some of the hard things are getting the teachers out of that box. And Brian, I liked what you said just about academia is often being locked in a room. And especially at the senior year, sometimes it's really hard to start to shift teachers thinking about that academia and how we can bring nature back into our schools. And so I guess what my question is for you is, how do we encourage teachers to let go of some of those fears about looking at the land as a teacher once again, and encourage them to get those get students back out onto the land and have the land as a teacher for us once again?
Yes, let's see. So what I was going to say is I'm bringing 2 schools out tomorrow. We're going to start at the Ledge, and we'll walk to the Forks. One of the most beautiful areas, I think, is where along the Siena River and the Red River where they meet, because we got cottonwoods that are about the same size almost as the redwoods. And I always bring the students out there when we go to St. Boniface so that they could touch that. I mean, a lot of people don't know cottonwoods have gender, so only the females basically, throw out the, I guess the fluff or whatever you call it. But I bring them out there not only for the historical part, but also to be out in nature, because you can't see anything, so you think you're in a major forest land, when you're inside there. So it's very, very beautiful. But you also have all that history there because, of course, that's really where the Métis settled, first, after 1812 or so. Lord Selkirk, supposedly, I guess he did in some way, presented the land to the Métis, although, he had just come. But that was because of the Hudson's Bay Company and all that kind of stuff that, we're just getting over now, I guess. But anyway, yeah, so, but I wanted to say something about corn because that's our people. Corn is, that's where it comes from. Our people, the Mayans, the Iroquois people, all the people from the south. When you have a stalk of corn, and sometimes you're going to see a perfect crown around it, we say that's the mother. That's the mother of all the corn. So when we talk about three sisters, we're not talking about simply three sisters. We're talking about there's a literal spirit inside those corn stalks. And that is like the clan mother of all the corn. So it's just how we frame things is differently, than simply, well, this is just a stalk of corn, that we eat or something. There's more to it. There's that spiritual component, that interaction, which was usually with women. And unfortunately, in our society, what happened was during the colonial times, we had kind of a revival, a cultural revival. But in that cultural revival, it basically said that, well, men will now be the farmers. And so the women lost, in a sense, part of that relationship because it's the mother. The earth, what we call the mother, is because of the sky woman who comes down. And when the muskrat takes that dirt and brings it up there, she comes with the waters, and we call her mature flowers because when the waters come together with the earth, we have the beginning of life and the first birthing that we know of, here on the earth is the plants, So we have all of these kind of stories that connect us, in a sense, to not only us as human beings, but also non-human beings in terms of how we see them. We see them as different, almost like they're a different nation. They're not simply, inanimate objects. And I used to always think about, my Algonquin friends, because they used to always distinguish between something like moose wias and moose, which moose is being alive, something that is alive. And a lot of things more are alive in our world, than they are dead because of that, eh? If it can do something, it's alive. If it can add something to your world, it's alive, And that's how we viewed it, eh? Even the pipes and these things.
Thanks, Brian, for that. I just wanted to, just to build on that question, around healing and whether it's teachers getting out of the box, the concrete box that we find ourselves in, or whether it's the kids that we're teaching. And I know, Damien, that you spend a lot of time working with young, especially boys or young men up north and healing from the land. Is that something that you wanted to speak to in some of those activities that you do?
Sure, yeah. And I think the question was about like how to get teachers implementing more of that learning out on the land. So I think really that just bubbles down to the open-mindedness of the teachers to go out and have that experience and to view the land as something that can teach, because without that, they won't see that as an option. So I would assume it's about getting the teachers to go out and have those experiences. Because when I think about it, that is exactly how I came to understand the land as a teacher. It's because I was I was brought out and taught by those who the land was their teacher. I was, mentored by people that were born in a pile of moss on the side of these little creeks that drain into the Hudson Bay, or these snowbanks scattered around the Hudson Bay lowlands. You know, people that, like my community was fully colonized much later than a lot of the communities down south here. So even just a couple lifetimes ago, or about a full lifetime ago, my community was still a nomadic community. We still moved around from place to place depending on the seasons and where the food was. So that land, that was 100%, that was our teacher. So that's, you know, that's how I've been granted or been given that understanding of how to use the land as a teacher. So to summarize that up, I would say maybe it's about taking the teachers out and showing them those experiences. You know, land-based education is so much more than going out and making a fire and cooking bannock on it. It's so much more than going out and picking sage. You know, like those are great activities. Not to be too critical, when I see land-based education, that's like 90% of it right there. But there's a whole world out there beyond that thin veneer that can give you so many tools to succeed in life, so many tools to understand, you know, critical thinking, strategic thinking, sound judgment, patience, courage, you know, all those building blocks that we can then take and use to have successful lives, and put them together with all the other experiences that we have. So again, I would say, you know, get the teachers out, open their minds, and let that process continue to feed itself.
Right. And you know, in some of our work, we work with, around land-based education, we work with 3 school boards: Frontier School Division in the north, and then Pembina Trails in the south, and Seven Oaks. And so they're doing exactly what you're saying, Damien, is that they're whether it's professional development days or whether it's workshops, they're starting to bring in elders and knowledge keepers to do exactly that teaching the teacher, right? And I think there's something humbling as someone who is also in the last quarter of my life, that ability that we can learn from others, even though we're kind of hired as teachers, is a really important one. And Amika, you have a question back there? Yeah.
I'll also stand up. Hi. I'm also a person who likes community and biology, so it's good company. Maybe a question for Brian Rice. I work with kids at Living Prairie Museum, and we do outdoor educational experiences, and I'm also heavily involved with a program called Enisko Mochigan, which tries to do urban land-based education. And I was wondering if you could reflect on what you do in your practice of trying to teach on the land in an urban context. Like you mentioned, you go on walks, but I'm wondering if you can elaborate a little bit more on what you find helps people learn more about the place and the land when we're in the city.
Yeah, I'll try this. I'll see if it works, okay?
Thanks.
Sego. Skanagoga. Brian Nugents. Yeah. Mohawk. We say that if we don't fulfill our duties and give thanks to the sun and all of the other elements, the world will come to an end. And so we sit here with Matt, myself, and Wisdom, helping the sun come up. Now, even if you don't believe that literally, the point is, if you did these things more often, there's a good chance our world will survive and we will see the sun come up continuously. But when we don't do these things and we think otherwise, we're all in trouble. And that's where we're at right today. So I'm going to present this beautiful day here and give thanks for the sun as it comes up. My 2 friends here. And hopefully we'll have a wonderful day. And the sun will be kind to us.
I know you can't really see it. But Matt is quadriplegic, so he couldn't come with the class, so I took him out. And this is what we do at U of M Lance. I wake him up 5 in the morning, basically, and we watch the sun come up. We watch the animals come out. We listen to the birds. So I want them, I don't want to talk at that time. I want them to listen. Because what I want them to see is that transition that happens every day that we take for granted. We never think about it, because we wake up at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock or whatever it is. But just giving yourself some quiet time just to see how beautiful the world is, the sun, all of these things, the grandmother moon at night, all of these types of things. And so that's what I want really, is that kind of reflection. I mean, I can't take them out on a 4-day fast, because we just can't do that, here. But we can at least get an understanding a little bit of what it's like to begin that process of, like, when I went on my first 4-day fast, it was in Mattawa. And, it was with John Agoni from Manitoulin Island. And it was just being quiet for 4 days and listening and observing, nothing else, and listening to your dreams and telling your dreams to the elder, and those types of things. And all of the unique experiences we never are able to really have because we're so busy in our lives. And that's the difference between the traditional life and the life we have today, is you had time, there was a lot of work, but you had time to process stuff a lot more in the past than we do have today. So you have to have and take that time to be able to do those types of things, just for your own state of being, your own health and such. And it really does help.
Thanks for that. Any other comments or questions? Anybody online, Debbie? Does that?
Yes. We have a comment online which perhaps will spark some discussion. This comes from Leanne. I'm struck by the theme of observing the land and imitating the land and working with what is naturally occurring. It's a refreshing and exciting contrast to the typical discussion about how to make the land do and grow what we want when we're talking about gardening.
Maybe starting with Raymond, and I imagine all the panelists would have something to say about working with the cycles and working with the land and working with nature rather than against it. But beginning with you, Raymond.
Yeah, thank you. I think working with the land or backyard biome or community gardening or whatever, I think it's beyond just talking about nature or talking about food. I can give an example as the Rainbow Community Gardens, for example, which is about over 250 families growing their vegetables on the university land here. It's, for many of them, it's a healing place. It's a cultural sharing place. It's a place where people come together to express their humor, their difficulties, anything that they have been through. Most of the participants, for example, are former refugees. So it happens from time to time to see women or men coming together, start talking, and then some start crying, and suddenly you will see them start laughing and all this. And many of them gave testimony that before they joined the garden for a project, for example, they used to remain inside their apartments when it's hot. And within the apartment, what they were good at doing was to sit down there, to watch TV, drink tea, going out, smoke, coming back, and all this, and seeing their kids fighting over remote control because everybody wants their show and stuff. So and those families came here, like over 250 families, growing their vegetables and having at least 200 lbs per growing season. So many of them say they do save on food, on groceries, at least 150 from July to October. So at least $600 that they save. And besides that, they said when they were not outside, they were remaining inside, they were spending a lot on alcohol, on cigarette, and all this. And many say that they used to go, they used to shop too much. And their frequency to the family doctors were high, but when they joined the garden, most of them do spend most of their days at the garden. So it's an opportunity here for me to say that besides getting teachers, instructors, to bring their students into land-based education, I think there is a role, an important role that educational institutions, universities can do to promote the backyard biome and gardening, for example, to a higher level. And it's for me an opportunity to express our sincere gratitude to the University of Manitoba on behalf of thousands of community members that this project, for example, has been touching, has been feeding over the past 15 years. The university, the relationship that the university built with our team on this project, the Rainbow Community Garden, is amazing, and it's unique because we do have the physical sciences. The greenhouse, I think it's somewhere here. They provide us with seedlings, at least 1,500 to 2,000 seedlings every year to the families. And those are seedlings that, yeah, thank you. And those are seedlings that are variety, like exotic seedlings. What happens is every year before we start the growing season, the greenhouse folks contacted me, and then we go over all the needs. Like last year, for example, there are families from Palestine and from Syria who were requesting some foods that they used to eat back home that they couldn't find here. And then the greenhouse was able to find those seeds for us. And from time to time, that's what they do. And we do receive support from the President's office. Through the Office of Sustainability, they have been helping us a lot because they work with the university's president's office on a land use and service agreement. Every 5 years we have to renew it. And they have been helping us, providing us with technical support and all this. So everywhere I go, I would like to get the opportunity to say what the university is doing. And if each of the institutions around can do that, imagine 250 times 200 lbs of food every year. That's a huge amount of food that is coming out. And not only the food, but also like mentally and all this, it helps a lot. And it saves taxpayers money on health situation, because those people who, some of them also who used to remain on medicines that had to walk out the medicine because of their connection with the land, because the land has a power. Having hands dirty, I think it helps. Mentally it helps, but also physically there is something that I can't describe, but it helps a lot. Thank you.
Okay, great, thanks Raymond. Is there one more question? Or hi, of course.
Hi. Yeah. We were able to destroy our grass last summer in our yard. I didn't want to mow anymore, and so we actually turned our entire yard into a garden, which was pretty epic. And we're hoping to do that again this year. We were able to plant a bunch of food and stuff. And my question is just if you guys had any comments or anything like what it would take to, or like just better tips as to what we could do like locally in order to continue to promote like healthy soil constitution in our city biome. We've managed to divert like all of our rainwater and stuff into like capture systems and things like that, which we saved about $300 on our water bill last year, so that was pretty awesome. And then with the egregious amount of pumpkins that we grew, we were able to give, everybody got a pumpkin at Halloween, and it was awesome. But yeah, so we were just kind of curious if you guys had any additional tips for us and what we could do in our garden to make it even more better.
Anybody want to respond to that?
I just want to say congrats on that badass gardening, especially the little gardener here. That's amazing work. And I was extra happy about what you did with your garden there, because that's exactly what I did when I moved down here for my reserve. My growing season up there, we've gotten 2 feet of snow the last week of June. They say in the garden guides where like after June 15th you could put your plants outside. I've put plants outside like June 30th and had them die of frost. And then sometimes before the end of August it's dipping below 0 and the plants are dying. Sometimes like it's just a wild card, it's a roll of the dice. There's a few years ago where we had our plants survive like into mid-October. I remember I was hunting moose in a t-shirt. Normally it's like full snowsuit up there, and the garden was still alive. So when I came down here, a couple years after I came down and I got my first yard, I tore every little bit of grass out. I went completely overboard. Like you with the pumpkins, I grew like 20-something hot pepper plants and 32 tomato plants. So, I was just being so nice. I had nobody else to give tomatoes to, so a car would drive by and I'd like, here you go. But I would say like just keep at it, right? Like it's a learning journey. You find what's the food you like, what do you like to grow, what works together, because it sounds like you're already doing it. So again, great job.
Cool, great, super. And I think, are we wrapping up or? So it's so maybe we've got room for one more question. Oh my God, okay. Who, okay, sure, yeah, that's okay, yeah.
Thank you, all the speakers, for giving us insight into the different aspects of backyard biome, actually. As you said, as the lady before me was asking about some plants which we can grow, I would like to ask about if you can name a few bushes or trees which we can grow in our backyard, which are easy to grow, and they are according to the environment, because I don't want to plant something against, because I have it's been 15 years since I'm here and I'm trying to see what suits here, because I'm from a tropical country and it's totally different there, and trying to see what the plants in zone 3, kind of, they would like to grow. And so just like 2 to 3 plants or bushes or trees, whatever comes to your mind right away. Thank you.
Saskatoons.
And then the cool thing with Saskatoons is that the birds and all sorts of other beings get to benefit from it too. So I think it's weird that I'm always late for everything, and but we're recording this, so I'll be able to show people that actually once upon a time I did show up on time. But I want to thank people here, but I also want to just say that I've been, like many university teachers, profs. I've been grading like crazy. And so I teach a course in critical thinking about the environment. And so it's usually pretty depressing when you're taking courses around the environment, just because everything's in decline. We hear about the climate crisis, we hear about the biodiversity crisis, and on and on. And so I decided to flip the narrative a couple of years ago. And so this is a take-home paper. It's a required course in our four-year program, Environmental Science and Studies. And so we started in this required course, fourth-year course. People are graduating, talking about solutions rather than, and so it's this idea of solutions-based thinking rather than deficit-based thinking. And so I do know I have a huge mountain of papers that I need to mark, and I've been immersed in it because it's a big class, almost 100 people. But it struck me, as everyone was speaking today, that what we have here are solutions that people are talking about. It's not just environment in trouble, environment, in crisis. And each of these people in very, very different ways, but kind of linked. And we've talked a little bit about the themes that link across these different experiences. Everyone is talking about solutions forward kind of thinking. And when we have the next generation here as well coming along, I think it's really, really important to make space for the good news stories. And so in that regard, I want to thank you, Damon. I want to thank you, Raymond, and I want to thank you, Brian, for a wonderful experience. And I want to thank the whole audience for hanging around and participating in this delightful experience. And so thank you. And as you're leaving, before you leave, assuming that some of the panelists can hang around for a few minutes, and people are busy, I know that, but maybe, and it's tax time, so if you're like me, you still have to do your taxes. You got a Jets game that maybe you're in blackout mode like I am, so you don't know what happened with that game. Listen, don't tell me, please don't tell me, because I'm going to watch it after my taxes are submitted at midnight. But maybe kind of hang around and maybe chat with one another or chat with some of the panelists, especially if you had a question that you didn't get a chance to get answered. So thank you, everyone.